All right, everybody, buckle up, because this time on the deep dive, we're heading straight into the world of African tech.
And we're diving deep.
Yeah, no kidding. Forget your average app launch. This is about Texonnect, and let me tell you, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's big, really making waves.
That's what caught our attention, right? We're talking research papers, articles, even insider accounts. We're not just skimming the surface here. We're going deep on this one.
Absolutely. And believe me, it's worth it.
So, good day, and to our listeners here, I'm very excited. This is actually the very first of what we call Texonnect Voices. And the whole idea behind Texonnect Voices is we have the Texonnect community, and we've identified 32 key areas that are part of the ecosystem. And these 32 areas, we want to explore them to ensure that everybody, whether you're in the tech space or not, appreciate the different facets of technology and where technology is going in the world. Today, we're beginning with one of these areas, and this is PropTech, or should I say property technology or real estate technology. And we are blessed to have an expert with us. His name is Chudu, but I'd like him to go ahead and introduce himself because there's a lot of parts to him, and I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So, welcome today to Texonnect Voices, and tell the audience more about yourself.
Okay, thanks, Papa. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Chude Osiewu. I'm the CEO at Venco. Venco is a PropTech startup focused on digitizing operations in multi-tenanted communities. Before that, I've been an SAP consultant, so I have a bit of experience, maybe more than a bit of experience in the ERP space. So I've had experience implementing ERP solutions for upstream oil and gas businesses. And before that, I used to be a software developer. So I've been running Venco for 2.5 years now. And basically, we're focused on digitizing, the processes within many of the multi-tenanted communities, that are springing up everywhere across Africa. So that's a brief summary of what I do and who I am.
Now, we met not too long ago. You were doing a phenomenal, should I say, product showcase on your Venco solutions. And for me, I thought it was mind-blowing, the possibilities, besides what you already have and also what is possible in the space. Do you want to run through a few of the things that you showcased us on before we get into discussing PropTech as a whole?
Yeah, great. Across Africa, urbanization is increasing, and with that, the predominance or prevalence of multi-tenanted communities. So these are the estates, the apartment blocks, the gated streets that you'll see, popping up across Africa, in Accra, in Lagos, in Abuja, Port Harcourt, Nairobi, Johannesburg, and everywhere else. But with these types of communities, the operators of the communities are finding that they require some sort of technology to help them easily run the community. So many of the activities that happen within these communities are collections for communal dues, issue management, communication, access control, and accounting. So basically being able to report on, give good stewardship of the funds that have, been contributed by the community. So Venco is like a dumbed down ERP for these types of communities to essentially enable them carry out these activities in an integrated manner and make it easier for the operators of the communities to, to render reports, information, and to essentially execute their functions, in a digital manner. Take as an example, one of the most basic things that happens in many communities, which is controlling access into and out of the community. Today, many communities have the logbook as the predominant way to sign in people and sign them out. However, from a data privacy perspective, the logbook is not really a great option because anyone can see, who's been visiting. You don't know where those books end up at the end of when they are filled, at the end of their lifetime. And essentially with Venco, we provided a digital alternative for this that you can operate through your mobile phone. It's the same thing with collections and many of the other features. Now, as Venco, we have there's a quid pro quo. So in solving the solution for the community, we are also getting access to the households in the community, and they form a big market into which goods and services can be sold. And essentially, when we get to our North Star, we're really pushing to get to 100,000 homes. We are currently in about 25,000. Then we will do a pivot to essentially then sweating the access that we have to these households. These are, think embedded finance, think marketplace services, think shared economy services, and data gathering to the benefit of the resident. So basically, that's what we are, a bit of a deeper dive into what we are able to do at Venco and what we are currently doing.
Wow. So I guess, ladies and gentlemen, you can see why this is the man I need to talk to about PropTech. He's in the business and he's getting his hands dirty. So let's come back a bit just to make sure that our listeners who are not either in real estate or in technology, because one of the things we're hoping to achieve with Texonnect is to ensure that even if it's a student just coming out of school who knows almost nothing or is fresh, can have a general enough information to decide, is this a career path I want to follow? Because I understand that your background was originally in consulting. You were doing ERP solutions, and now you found yourself in PropTech. So just so people have enough information to make a decision as to where to go. So what is PropTech and how has it evolved in recent years?
Yeah, so PropTech, put simply, is the application of digital technology to the whole real estate value chain, right? So before we even talk about deploying Venco in a community, the community has to have been built. It has to have been financed. Materials need to have been sourced for, the construction. The properties needed to have been designed, and so many other, stops in between. So the application of technology at any point in that phase, from the conceptualization of, the property all the way to its operation, that's PropTech.
Interesting.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, it's okay. Interesting. I'm actually just going through a situation this weekend, and what you're talking about just kind of rubs my mind. I sometimes double in team building, and I'm supposed to see a location. I'm supposed to take a team. And when I was talking to the marketing manager for the place, he decided to send me a video. But the video is such a quick dash through that I can't appreciate what I'm going to do with it. So I've heard about virtual property tours, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but if you are, how are they changing the real estate buying experience or giving people the opportunity to see what it is that they buy so they don't get disappointed?
Yeah, so great. So virtual property tours, they're not such a new phenomenon. In fact, I remember that I have a cousin who lives in the UK who had a startup for a time that was about virtual property tours. And they had, the 3D rendering of the properties, and you could navigate through the property, by clicking on points on the screen. And I think that I would say that in my own experience, it's something that is more prevalent in the West, than in Africa. So I have seen one or two startups, attempt it, but not as the full offering, but as part of, a broader offering, maybe a listing service, and something similar. But I do think that as more and more people are looking to rent and to essentially move into places, there will be more demand for that, because again,
especially with Airbnbs and all these things coming up.
Exactly, so the amount of effort. So I mean, there's Airbnbs, and then there's also short-term and medium-term rentals, right? So for medium-term rentals, the inspection is usually a major part of the process of renting. But if you want to have choice, as many of the listing services are now giving us, if you want to have choice, you may not have the amount of time or enough time for you to actually physically inspect all of these locations. And that's where a quality virtual tour can be of big benefit, because it enables you to appraise a large number of options and then make a choice. However, having said that, just because of the general trust level that is building up, on the continent, you would typically want to then have narrowed down to 1 or 2 or 3 options, which you would then go and physically visit. But I think that there's a place for virtual tours. The key thing is that I see them as complementary to other services, such as listing services. Yeah.
Would you call Venco, the Venco solution, like a smart building management system?
So not so much a smart building management system as a smart community or smart city management system. So yeah, so now that community could be a building. It could be a 20-unit apartment block, right? But it could also be the typical estate where you have discrete houses, across a location. So I prefer to think about it as a smart community management or smart city management. But to be honest, it can find application everywhere from an apartment block to a whole smart city. That's the way I would position Venco.
And what would you say the key benefits of smart building management systems are for property owners and tenants?
So the one that pops up, straight away that comes to mind is just increasing the affordability of the places. And how is that? So the cost of energy across Africa is essentially at a premium these days. It's increasing, and people are becoming more and more sensitive to their energy cost. Having a smart building management system that interfaces into IoT devices, for example, that is gathering data on user behavior, when are they home, when are they not home, what are the times when you can reduce your energy supply, maybe like if you're using a backup generator and stuff like that. Having a smart building management system essentially enables you to optimize costs for the people who are living in it, and ultimately for whoever is operating it, because in many cases in Africa, what is happening is that the operator of the community is bearing the cost first and then looking to allocate it to the residents. So from even a cash management perspective, if I can reduce my outgoings, it puts less stress on me as a business. And then ultimately it reduces the complaints from residents, and it gives them a better quality of life and reduces their spend, their outgoings, on just accessing utilities and all of that. Also, of course, there's the security angle as well. So with smart building management, with integration of closed circuit cameras, with access control systems of the type that we provide at Venco, you're increasing security in these communities and just making life more comfortable and safer for those who are living within the communities.
Now, you said cost, and I know a lot of my audience their ears are going to perk up when you mention cost, especially in this part of the world. Can we drill down on the cost? What type of savings can you have, or what are the areas in which you can save or reduce costs using smart building technology?
Okay, so let's take on the part of energy, for example. So you can't control, there's a saying that you can't control what you can't measure. If you are not able to measure what the gross energy consumption in a community is, what you'll find is that you'll find yourself out of pocket end of the month when you have eaten the food and it's now time to pay for it, right? With a smart building management system, you can have real-time trending of what the energy consumption is, and you can actually localize your areas of higher spend. And based on that, you can then put into action, policies and, decisions that help you to reduce that. So for example, in the community where I live, we had to change out the bulbs that were powering the street lights in the community, because it turns out that a poor decision was made in selecting those bulbs. And we were finding that our communal area costs were consistently high. All we had to do was stick on a digital meter, like a smart meter, into the line that supplies the street lights, and we were able to see that the consumption off the charts. That was able to be monitored real time off of the Venco dashboard, because this community uses Venco, and we were able to then see that, hey, there have to be better options for lighting the streets without essentially burning money. And eventually we were able to find lower powered LED lights that provided the same amount of insulation, and we deployed them, and we've seen our cost come down. So that's just an example, about how deploying this type of, smart devices, measurement devices, and having a system that where you can monitor that consumption can help you to take decisions that effectively bring down the cost of living for everyone in the community.
Naya giving me a lot of ideas for my engagement on energy tech much later in the series, and some of the things that I'd like to explore. In Ghana, sometimes we have people complaining that there are different meters in different houses, and some claim that some of the meters are charging more than others. Sometimes I think it's a rumor, but I wish that we had the data to actually compare to see if this is actually true or it's just a feeling. And it would be good if we had these devices so we can set or put this thing to rest. Very exciting stuff. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, these days you can't have a conversation without talking about AI. How is AI being used for property valuation, and is it more accurate compared to human appraisers?
Yeah, so that's interesting because, I found myself earlier this year in a conference of, what they call in Nigeria, quantity surveyors. Those guys are usually responsible for the valuation of property. And this topic about AI, as a basis for making valuations actually came up. And I think that it's something that is going to be more and more interesting over time. However, like with everything AI, it's really about the data. You're not going to be able to run AI systems without having trained them on data and have access to copious data, that enables you to basically do the inferencing and draw conclusions. So I would say that even before getting into the impact of AI in there, we need to look at how the digitization efforts, around land and property valuation, is kept in all of these environments that we're operating in Africa. So for me, that would be the first step, because you have to get the data and then train these systems on the data before then actually deploying these things. I don't think you can do valuation without at least some sort of historical context, and extensive training on based on the data that already exists. So I think it's a thing. It's a nice idea, but I don't think it will be very easy to implement if people who are interested
don't work on the data.
don't work on the data and don't have access to that data. Today, the repository of a lot of that data is in offices of lands and properties in government offices all across Africa. So there has to first be a digitization effort. There has to be an open framework or platform, you understand, where these can become accessible, and then based on that, the training can be done and decisioning can then be made.
Speaking of open forums and big platforms, how do you think the online property marketplace is disrupting the traditional real estate practice?
Oh, well, actually, I think it's disrupted already. So you'll see, a lot of the listing platforms. There's Mikasa over there in Accra, in Ghana. There's Property Pro and tons of them in Nigeria. You have the same in Kenya. These are the three markets where we currently operate. And I think that they've disrupted already, because today, the first port of call for many people when looking for property, especially to rent, is these online platforms where they are then able to contact agents, and then those agents are then able to take them, through, the properties. So the inventorying of that data and these properties across on these online listing platforms I think is a very good thing. In fact, at Venco, we use some of that data for marketing, right? Because we want to be able to identify amongst all of that, all the flats or properties that are listed there, which ones exist in the kind of target estates that we want to serve. And then we are able to contact the agents there, and maybe they'll have an inroads to decision makers in those communities. But beyond that, as Venco, we also have a property listing play for us somewhere in the future. Today, we have about 25,000 property units across the communities that we serve. And many of them, we know what their occupancy level is. We know whether they are occupied or unoccupied. We are working on a project where once a property is set as unoccupied, it then actually gets fed to any subscribed listing platforms to our service. So, and we also want to challenge ourselves to then provide agency, so that as properties are becoming empty, we can also try and go and look for those who will occupy them and perhaps, generate more revenue through agency.
Interesting. Now, you were talking security initially. Where does blockchain come in when it comes to enhancing transparency and trust in transactions in the real estate space?
I think it comes in especially around land registration, details. So I do know a startup here in Nigeria that has basically built a blockchain solution for land and property registration. And they've actually partnered with a number of, state offices of lands to deploy their software on a white labeled basis. But also, they partnered with real estate developers who are developing estates so that, like when you buy into the typical estate or apartment block, you get a deed of assignment or sublease for your own specific unit. So registering those things in their private blockchain-powered, platform is now becoming a thing, and I see that they are getting quite a bit of traction on there. And in terms of reducing fraud, increasing transparency, and all of that, I think that is the way to go, and I think that that's a perfect use case for blockchain.
And I can also see things like smart contracting coming into play to make sure that contracts are secure. Exactly. And so forth and so on.
Exactly.
All right, let's move to AR and VR, augmented reality, virtual reality. Where do they come in?
I kind of see it as also linked to, the earlier points on virtual tours, right? So there's this whole concept of, so from a bit, leveraging off of a bit of my experience from oil and gas, they have these really complex floating platforms, online, offshore, where to maintain them, there are so many bits and parts within these equipments that they maintain digital twins of those things. So there's essentially a complete virtual version of those equipments and platforms that are on people's computers or, in the cloud. And I think that when it comes to maintaining complex, real estate, especially large real estate, for those who have large portfolios, the same idea actually applies. So, we are now seeing people who are also doing virtual tours, but based on digital twins, which is like, essentially 3D renditions of the property that you can navigate and go into every nook and cranny and understand it. And this actually stems everywhere from the design. So you're seeing architects using this kind of technology to actually the sale and marketing, where people can actually virtually, enter these properties, see them in a furnished state, style them differently, before they move in. I think that that's actually a place where we'll see more and more traction and interest, from people, because again, it's a time-saving measure. You can make decisions without actually having to physically expend cost or energy on, on the property. And then you can see the outcomes that you want and then implement them, having looked at a near real life or near real life virtual rendition of the of the asset. So I think that this is a space that we'll see more and more traction and interest, just because of the time and cost saving and the flexibility and convenience that it gives, those who are developing and those who want to buy these assets.
So bye-bye AutoCAD 3D. We're like in the new phase now.
Well, maybe, I mean, I think AutoCAD 3D is one of the platforms that can be used to generate this.
Interesting.
With the infusion of, so again, there's a confluence of all of these things, 3D technology, AI, 3D printing, if we're going to go a bit, and it's not too futuristic, I was watching a documentary the other day about houses being built using 3D printing in Germany, right? So
Wow.
I think there's a confluence of all of those things. I don't know that would be a great idea in Africa just yet, because we are still trying to solve unemployment, but you can see where things are heading.
Well, it might make things cheaper. You never know. Prefabs and things are coming into the picture. So I remember there was some people having arguments about getting a prefab house for $20,000, and everybody felt like finally they can also own a home. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Let's expand on emerging technologies or emerging trends in PropTech. What are you excited about? What is it that you know is coming that you're excited about?
And well, so I'll speak from the area of PropTech that is closer to home for us at Venco. PropTech as a vehicle to launch marketplaces, as well as PropTech as a way to probably one of the best use cases for IoT. For me is a hot new area that I think people should be looking out for. When we met, I think I was giving you an example of how in the end, all of these properties are being built for people to live in or to work in. And when you're living somewhere, I don't think that it's enough to just say, hey, I've given you an app for you to access services in your home. There is the benefit of everyone in your community being on the same platform. And when everyone is on the same platform, then that's a market creation, opportunity there, because you can then do things like the market day, concept that I spoke to you about, which is where you can aggregate demand and do a shared economy play, amongst neighbors. So none of those things by itself is a new thing, but us now situating it within, a PropTech platform that is used to manage an estate, I think is a big innovation. Then of course, the use of IoT for example, being able to detect when things like cooking gas are about to run out, and being able to aggregate data on that and draw trends that enable you to do just-in-time delivery of cooking gas to people. And because you can see those patterns and you can do aggregate demand, you can again reduce the cost of, of that type of thing to the consumers. I think that's, again, something that hasn't really seen application anywhere else that, that I've looked, but is an interesting new area for, for people in our area, in our space, in the whole PropTech continuum. So I would say that for me, those are the two things of, top interest now, how to take advantage of, the groups of people take advantage of having access to them to provide them with better value, and of course to also create revenue generation opportunities for us.
So in your view, based on this, and to whatever real estate people may be listening to us, what does the future of property management look like, especially with automation and AI tools?
I think it will become more digital. So let's think about it. A real estate developer may spend 2 or 3 years developing a property. He'll sell it off, but that property is a long-lived object that will be existing for 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years, right? So if we step back, and take, like a broad view of it, the more important part of the life of a property is that 50 years that it's existing in, right? And whether that property has been built in a way that is future-proof, that is amenable to improvements, when we talk about, for example, cost of living, the impact on the environment, and all of that. So I see that technology will become more and more important, right, in the running of these communities, and these houses or these buildings, because more of the life of those properties are spent, just being operated than being built. Today, a lot of the focus is on the building and the selling. But I think as we spend more time and, technology makes more inroads into different aspects of our lives, just the same way that Venco is doing now for the running of properties. We'll see the adoption of digital technology to help improve efficiencies, to reduce the impact on the environment, and to increase convenience, for the people who are living in this. Because ultimately, all of this is to serve the fundamental need of human beings to have housing, to have shelter, and all of that. So it's a massive market. Everyone has to live somewhere. And I don't think that technology will be left out in making that, a better deal and outcome for those living in those spaces.
Okay, so let's shift to those in our government space that are watching this. You are well versed in smart community management, but let's expand to smart cities. How are they influencing the future of real estate technology, and what should authorities be doing to take advantage of the space?
Yeah, great. So I think authorities should be coming up with, I'm not one for over-regulation. So I think authorities should generally stay out of private business, just set the fundamental framework for things to operate. But I think that they can encourage with certain policies. So let's take, for example, the incidence of rent, and how in many countries in Africa, rent is paid annually, sometimes biannually instead of monthly. Why is this? The reason is that landlords perceive a lot of risk, and don't want to go through the stress of collecting monthly because they envisage that there may be difficulty collecting. I think that government policies can help to support and encourage the concept of monthly rent, right? And if they are encouraging the concept of monthly rent, then, on a citywide scale, then it improves the outcome for the landlords, it improves the outcome for the residents, because all the government has to do is provide some guarantees and write the laws in a way that landlords don't feel that they are disadvantaged, because annual rent and biannual rent is a compensation mechanism that many property owners use to reduce the pressure and the anxiety that they have when it comes to collecting rent. So they'll say, hey, let me put this off or set this up in a way that I only have to go through this once a year. But with certain policies in place, government can actually start to encourage the prevalence of monthly rent, which makes housing more accessible to a larger number of people, and also generates more regular cash flow for the owners of real estate. And I think there are quite a number of things that certain governments across the continent are already doing in this regard. On the scale of the smart city, I think a lot of governments now, if you just do a search over on Google, you'll see quite a number of smart city projects across Ghana, across Nigeria, and very particularly in Kenya as well. And the main hallmark of this is medium to low cost housing, right? That is built at scale, but is using technology to make sure that, the operating costs of these places are not outside the capacity or the capabilities of those who we are seeking to live in them. So those government policies around, the proper design of smart cities, the proper financing of them, encouraging, I think a lot of the impact is in the financing and making sure that those who have investment money to build these types of cities are, de-risked, when they decide to make such investments. So I would say that there's a lot of work going on by governments. I've seen quite a number of World Bank projects also, moving along that line. So I would say that it's a good thing, that governments are becoming more interested in it, and I would like to see more of that. And a lot of it, is dependent on policies, that the government can make to encourage investors ultimately to put down their money and essentially fill up the housing deficits that is prevalent across the continent.
Interesting. Now, speaking of risks, what are the biggest cybersecurity risks in real estate technology, and how can they be mitigated?
Well, many of these technologies are gathering a certain amount of data. So you want to be sure that there's security of that data to make sure that you don't, get into situations where, people's privacy is not respected. But I think there's also a bigger risk in that, if, for example, we are now deploying a lot of technology, IoT, and the fundamental operation of the communities is very entwined, with technology. Think about your smart meters, both water and energy. Think about the smart access devices that we have, and all of those. There can be bad actors who can essentially grind to a halt the operations of these communities by just, compromising or hacking some of these equipment, making sure that they don't operate the way that they are supposed to operate, or even, provide false information that could lead to material loss in, property and life. So I think for me, those are the two main risks. But again, these are broader risks beyond just PropTech. We are becoming more and more reliant on technology. And with that comes the risk of compromise of that technology. So I think that in tandem to these innovations being, released and deployed, that we have to have the security side of things also top of mind, so that the technology, around securing this type of infrastructure is growing at the same pace, or is meeting up with the innovations, in terms of the functionality and features being provided.
Very interesting. Now, what are the main challenges of basically integrating prop tech solutions into existing real estate infrastructure for those who are interested in moving?
So I would say that it's education. So a lot of people are still used to doing things the manual way, the old way, and like, change is never easy. So I would say it's more about education. So at Venco, for example, we take a big part of our responsibility to be, just educating residents in communities, operators of communities, about what is possible and how their lives can be made easier, by the application and deployment of, technology, bringing it into their day-to-day operations, into the way that they are building, into the way that they are managing, and all of that. So I think education is the main thing to solve. And we are seeing a lot of that happening now, but I think that more of it is needed. To help with the education part of things, we wrote a book at Venco called How to Run an Estate. I'll share a link with you. You may want to share it with your audience. But I think that efforts like these are the things that, increase, the awareness and then ultimately adoption of technology in PropTech in real estate.
We've shared a lot of information, but let's expand it a bit and say, what are the opportunities of PropTech? You've mentioned quite a bit. You've mentioned quite a few, but yeah, what's the icing on the cake that should make everybody get involved?
Well, I see. Technology is here to stay. It's only going to, form a bigger and bigger part of our lives. And I don't think that real estate and, property management is an exception to that rule. For me, we've observed a pattern. Increasing urbanization is making people to centralize more in terms of the type of real estate they're building. So apartment blocks are becoming the norm, estates are becoming the norm, groups of houses are, with common access and utilities are becoming the norm. The opportunity I see there is that in serving these groups, right, we are creating markets that goods and services can be, can be pushed into, right? All of these people have needs. They buy the same things, they purchase the same goods, they purchase the same services, and they are now on the same platforms. I think there's a ton of innovation, right from embedded finance based on the data that's gathered on the platform of people's spend history, the KYC in terms of their locations and, knowing where they are then able to use that as some sort of credit bureau where they can then access credits, because again, more advanced societies are those where credit is accessible to, large parts of the population. And I think that this will be a part of that mix in Africa, where since people are living in communities and the data on them can be, accessed in a way that protects the privacy of the residents, that can also be brought to the benefits of the residents, by giving them access to credit based on the information that systems, have. Of course, we've also spoken about, IoT and its ability to reduce energy spend, to have a positive impact on the environment, because when you're reducing energy spend, you're also reducing the pollution and, environmental impact of the generators and the, plants that, provide this energy. So I would say that there's, a lot that, technology a lot of impact that it can have in the real estate space.
Interesting. Now, we have people who are probably listening, have no idea, have no experience, but are excited about what's going on and want to get in. How can someone new to the real estate industry start getting involved in PropTech ecosystem?
So there are quite a number of PropTech forums. I know of 2 in Ghana. I know of quite a number of them in Nigeria and also in Kenya. So one way would be to, join 1 or 2 of these forums, and interact with the people there and kind of see the range of things that's possible. Another way would be to, well, of course, read up on PropTech. There are quite tons of resources now and that you can read up on to come up to speed with, the trends in PropTech. And there are organizations like the Africa PropTech Forum, headquartered in South Africa, but that is like a very big evangelist for PropTech, across the continent. And of course, you can always reach out to us at Venco. Our website is venco.africa. There we have a blog series that, talks about, really interesting topics across the PropTech continuum and the real estate continuum. So any of those methods, should be able to get you in, to the PropTech circle, and then you can go from there.
What type of skills and expertise are most in demand in the environment or in the space?
Well, from my perspective, always looking for good software development skills, people who have a good technology foundation, but also understand the processes and requirements and needs in the PropTech space. You also need people. So one of the things that we need are, for example, people who do sales and marketing of PropTech, of property, of real estate. We need more of their type, but to help us in the PropTech area to be able to better tell the stories of how PropTech can benefit the many communities that we are targeting and that we know need a solution. On the broader scale, I think that some of the skills that I would like to see are, for example, in building technology. So one of the challenges that I've noticed with real estate construction across Africa is that we build for the aesthetics, we build for the costs to minimize the cost, but we don't build, and when I say cost, the cost of construction, but we don't build with the cost of living in the house in mind. So you're going to find in many properties, and communities across Africa, that when you look at the cost of energy, the way that the house has been built is a big contributor to the costs, to how much you spend living in the house. And that with very few, design considerations, you can easily halve the cost of, living in these properties, just with the right type of windows, with the right type of ventilation, with the right type of glazing on the windows, and even with the right type of materials for building the structure and for roofing. So I think that from a technology point of view, that's somewhere that Africa and Africans really need to focus on. How are we building these properties? Are we building them in a way that is sustainable and that reduces impact on environment?
Beautiful. So my last question has 6 parts, okay? And this is the last question for this engagement. What is your advice
Okay.
for one? What is your advice for one? Real estate professionals, 2. Government, 3. Interior designers, 4. Students, 5. Soon to be homeowners, and 6. Everyone else.
Okay, so let me see. I'm trying to write that down quickly. Real estate professionals.
So real estate professionals, governments,
Yeah,
interior designers, students, soon to be homeowners or renters or whatever you want to call it, and then
yeah.
everyone else.
Okay, students, soon to be homeowners. Okay, and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else. Okay, so for real estate professionals, my main advice would be not to sleep on technology. That there are lots of efficiencies that can be gotten from adopting technology in many of the processes that we, that you do today. So always keep an eye out on how you can use technology to improve efficiencies, reduce cost, and increase the satisfaction of your customers. For governments, it's about the policies. Please put in enabling policies that enable it easier to build these houses, that enable it, that incentivize building them in a way that is environmentally sustainable and also accessible to those who are going to live in them, cost-wise. And also in, policies that help to make it easier to essentially rent, and get into these houses. Annual rent, I think, is a big, cancer, really, with respect to accessing housing. And I think that governments have a big role to play in terms of, the laws around rent control laws and all of that to help to make housing more accessible to people. For interior designers, there's a lot of fantastic technology out there that can help you to essentially simulate, the work that you're going to do for your customers before you actually have to, pick up do any physical work, right? So a lot of this 3D work, lots of really great AI tools that you can actually prompt and tell it to, design somewhere, according to a theme, according to the taste of the customer and all of that. I think you should get on that. It increases your productivity, allows you to serve more people, and also your output is, really much better, using tools like that. For students, don't sleep on PropTech. PropTech is like a really important, area, not just for people students in the real estate space, not just for architects, for surveyors and all of that, but also for those in the software and more technical spaces. So everything from developing software to building technologies, right? Materials, better materials for, for building that require less energy to use or to live in, and that make it easier and faster to actually build these properties. Students, please focus on those areas, do the research in those areas. Advice for soon to be homeowners. Well, there's a lot of resources out there that enable you to get, the best deal for your price range in properties. So I think that, doing a lot of research online, looking at these listing services, talking to people like Venco, for example, that has experience across this community. So today, Venco is deployed in about 340 communities across Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya. What it means is that we have a lot of data with respect to quality of life and satisfaction of the residents in there. Seek out sources like this so that, you make informed decisions when you're about to make that big step of finding, your own place to live in, so that, it doesn't become a had I known scenario. So I think data is key. Do your research. And for everyone else, PropTech is the way to go. There have been several eras in the startup space. There's been Fintech, there's been blockchain. It's the era of AI now. And I think the era for PropTech is coming. So watch out.
Awesome, powerful, great. So we've come to the end of our discussion. This is really good stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to benefit from it. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to reach out to Venco because obviously Venco knows its stuff, and nobody wants to deal with anybody who doesn't know their stuff. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for engaging with us on Tech Connect Voices, and definitely we'll be giving you feedback as we come along.
Fantastic, Papa. Thank you for having us and having me. And yeah, we'll be in touch. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.